Hey guys, Wayne Fillmore. I'm coming to you guys live at 12:36 p.m. It is February 2nd, 2017, and right now I want to go through something called the Worldview approach. So a lot of you guys know, or maybe you guys don't know, that I subscribe not to accommodationism and not to concordism, but I subscribe to a view called the Worldview approach, which was basically compiled by a woman named Carol Hill. She is a author of ASA. You can go to www.asa.org. It's named after one of Charles Darwin's Christian friends, Asa Gray. That is the name of the think tank Christian organization, asa.org. I think if I'm correct, that is the name of the website. So I want to jump straight into this, and I want to start off with what exactly the worldview approach is and how can we use it to properly interpret the Bible, because there's so many different views on what interpretation is and etc. It's hard to really come to the right conclusion of which one works best. And so I'll give you guys my opinion, my spill on the whole thing, starting now, as a matter of fact. So if you guys can see my screen, right on my screen is the paper that was written by Carol Hill. Here's the website right here, actually. It's www.asa3.org. So she basically starts off, and her title is A Third Alternative to Concordism and Divine Accommodation, the Worldview Approach. And so basically the premise to the premise of the worldview approach is that the Bible in its original context or historical events if considered worldview of the biblical author. And so, like I always say, we have to understand that the people who wrote the Bible didn't think like you or me. They had a completely different cosmology and view of the world around them. They didn't know about the earth, sky, and sea and space like we do today. So we have to take that into consideration when we come to an ancient text like the Bible. The Bible is not a science book. However, from the premise of the worldview approach, we can use our modern science after we first find out what the ancient Near Eastern writer meant by what they wrote. And so I'll give you guys a really good example of this. So I'm going to get a little bit into algebraic concepts. So algebra is when we use inverse operations. And so basically we can use inverse operations to solve simple equations. For example, x plus 5 equals 13, x equals 13 subtract 5, x equals 8. So what we did here, we did the inverse equation where we basically subtracted 5 from 13. You took the difference so that you could get x. And so basically what we're doing is we're working backwards. That's what algebra is used for. We use algebra and mathematics so we can work backwards to see if we got the right answer, to see if we got the right if we solve properly for x. And so in the same sense, we can actually do that with the Genesis account. Here's a really good example. So the Bible says, in the beginning, God created the universe. Well, when this verse was first written down, basically the main view of the ancient Near East cosmology of the day was that the universe was eternal. The universe didn't have beginning. If you go to Hebrews 11:3, it says, by faith we understand that time was created by the Logos, or Logos. And so I say Logos because I have an American accent. So, but long story short, we now can show you at the Planck epoch, we can show you when the universe began. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm not doing anything to the biblical text. I'm simply inserting our modern knowledge into the ancient text, and I'm working backward. I'm doing bottom-up science because the ancient people did top-down science. And as I'm working backwards, I'm trying to see if we get the same answer. So they were trying to solve for x in their own way, and I'm trying to solve for x in my own way. And I want to see if we can take our modern science, plug it into the equation, and get the same value. Meaning, is God creator or not? So if God really is creator, our modern science should be able to fit into the text. It should comport with reality. And what do you know? In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And I actually have here we go, that you guys can see. The actual date for the universe being created is 13.999 plus or minus 021, or that is 13.8 billion years ago. That is when the beginning was. And look right here, we can now plug in the actual number for 13.8 billion years. That is when the universe began. Now, remember, from an ancient Near Eastern perspective, there is no Hebrew word for 13.8 billion years ago. There is no word for astrophysics or the Planck epoch. They didn't have these words. And so, God being God, he had to inspire these writers to write down what they knew in their brains at their time, but they did it in such a way where God inspired it so it can communicate to everybody and all generations. Moving on to verse 2. It says, when the earth was as yet unformed and desolate, with the surface of the ocean depths shrouded in darkness, and while the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters, the surface of the waters, God said, let there be light. And so this is talking about the creation of the earth, which we know is 4 billion years ago. But wait a minute. There's a gap in between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2. It forgot about stars forming and photons beginning to form from the Planck epoch of creation. Well, actually, there is a theory to explain this called the gap theory, but you guys can see in the text literally went from 13.8 billion years of universe history, and now is talking about the earth being formed. Obviously, there's a gap in between Genesis 1 and Genesis 1:2, and that would be 9 billion years. Okay, here we go. So 13.8 billion years ago, the universe was created. There's a gap in between the universe being created and the earth fully forming. And if we keep on going, the global primeval oceans that we see in Genesis 1:2, that would have happened around 4.4 billion years ago. And then something else happens in Genesis verse 3. It says, God said, let there be light. So there was light. Now remember, the earth is already formed. There's 9 billion years of universe history that is not talked about. So the earth is already here. The photons, which actually formed 10 seconds after the Big Bang, those are already here because it's been past 13 billion years. So what is this light referring to? Well, obviously this is the light from the sun. But when did this exactly happen? Well, remember, these are long yomes or epochs of creation. They didn't have the exact date, but from what we now know about Earth's hazy atmosphere and everything, right? We can actually go into what we now know from modern science if you look over to the right. And this was 3 billion years ago, where it's talking about the atmosphere being transformed from darkness right here. It says, while the surface of the ocean depth shrouded in darkness. This is talking about the atmosphere. The atmosphere was dark and hazy. And the atmosphere transforms from being dark and hazy to now there's light. And when did this happen? This was 3 billion years ago. Now, I didn't do anything to the text at all. I simply plugged in our modern data into an ancient book. And if you take these days as long consecutive or long indefinite periods of time, we now can tell you when these events in Genesis actually happened. And so, from using the worldview approach and also using concepts that we know about in algebra today, Genesis 1 reads like a scientific primer. And I didn't do anything to the text at all except for insert our modern data into the ancient text, and it works. And I just want to go down a little bit farther, show you guys something else. As a matter of fact, no, that what Septuagint. But long story short, I'm probably going to end this video right here. If you guys and you like them, feel free to check out ACID. You can go to the website. It is www.acid3.com. And if anybody wants to do a critique of this video or want to do a review of what I just did, feel free to. But all I'm saying is the model works. to the Bible, it fits the reality that we live in. And also, I'm still respecting the perspective of the ancient writers. I understand they didn't know about these things that we now know about today. But what I am saying is, yeah, they didn't know about these future scientific discoveries. But why is it that the Genesis account is so sophisticated and it fits our modern scientific information? Now, remember, there is not necessarily any new scientific information that's added to the Bible. So there isn't any new scientific revelations in the Bible per se. But God is consistently accommodating the text to where people are at to fit their understanding. Now, if I didn't know anything about ancient or Eastern cosmology, I could have still come up with this from the ancient text. But the ancient people didn't know about science. They didn't know about the Big Bang. They didn't know about astrophysics or Earth history. But we do. And so either these ancient Jews were so sophisticated and ingenious that they inserted modern science into the Bible, and they said, "Oh, this is going to be so cool." We know 13.8 billion years ago the universe started, and 4 billion years ago the Earth formed, 3 billion years ago that's when the atmosphere changed. Or maybe when God was inspiring these ancient people to write down the text, He was down things for their audience at their time. The same text in a sense where we could plug in or our information, the value of the ancient Bible and vision. So maybe we're just looking at different sides of the equal sign, and we're coming out with the same answer. And that answer is God is creator. God created the universe. God began the universe, and Genesis, at least for now, for this video, I'll say it seems as if Genesis is true. So that is my approach to the Bible. And if you don't like it, tell me why. If you do like it, tell me why. If you want to make a response video, do so, and I'll probably make a response video back. But I hope you guys like what I did here, and I'll see you guys soon. Until next time, good luck and good night.